Marcus Williams walked into Lincoln High School's archery range with his shoulders hunched forward, trying to make himself as small as possible. The familiar sound of arrows hitting targets filled the air, mixed with the chatter and laughter of his classmates. He had been dreading this moment all week. "Look who's here," sneered Jake Morrison, the school's star athlete. "Ready to miss every shot again, Williams?" The group around Jake burst into laughter, and Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mrs. Henderson, the physical education teacher, clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, class, let's get started with today's archery lesson. Remember, this counts toward your final grade." She handed out the bows and arrows, her eyes lingering on Marcus with what seemed like sympathy. Marcus had always been the target of jokes in gym class. Whether it was basketball, soccer, or track, he somehow managed to mess things up. His coordination was terrible, and his confidence was even worse. The other students had nicknamed him Miss Williams because he missed everything he aimed for. As the class lined up at the shooting line, Marcus found himself between Sarah Chen, who was surprisingly good at sports despite being quiet, and Tyler Brooks, who never missed a chance to make fun of someone. Marcus gripped his bow with sweaty palms, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations, or rather, their expectation that he would fail spectacularly. 10 points if Williams actually hits the target, Tyler whispered loud enough for others to hear. 20 points if he hits the bullseye. The comment drew more snickers from nearby students. Mrs. Henderson demonstrated the proper stance and technique. Feet shoulder-width apart, bow arm straight. Draw the string back to your anchor point, aim, and release smoothly. She made it look effortless as her arrow sailed through the air and landed near the center of the target. When it was Marcus's turn, he could feel dozens of eyes watching him. He tried to remember Mrs. Henderson's instructions, but his hands were shaking. He drew the bowstring back, aimed at the large yellow circle in the center of the target, and released. The arrow flew wide, missing the entire target board and embedding itself in the hay bales behind. The laughter was immediate and loud. "Classic Williams," Jake called out. "Maybe try aiming at the wall next time. You might actually hit the target by accident." Marcus's face turned red as he walked to retrieve his arrow. This was exactly what he had expected, but it still hurt every time. He had hoped that maybe, just maybe, archery would be different. Maybe this would be the sport where he could finally prove he wasn't completely hopeless. But as he pulled his arrow from the hay bales, listening to his classmates continue to joke about his terrible shot, Marcus felt that familiar sinking feeling in his stomach. He was the class joke, and nothing was going to change that. Mrs. Henderson watched the scene unfold with a thoughtful expression. She had been teaching for over 20 years and had seen all types of students. Something about Marcus reminded her of herself when she was younger. Not the lack of skill, but the way he carried himself, like someone who had given up before even trying. As the class continued with their practice rounds, Marcus's shots didn't improve much. Some hit the outer rings of the target, which was better than his first attempt but still far from impressive. Each miss was met with more laughter and comments from his classmates. "At least you're consistent," Sarah said quietly, as they collected their arrows together. It was the first time anyone had spoken to him during gym class without making fun of him, and Marcus wasn't sure if she was being kind or sarcastic. The class period was nearly over when Mrs. Henderson made an announcement that would change everything. "I'm going to be starting an after-school archery club," she said. "Anyone interested in improving their skills and maybe competing in some tournaments can stay after class on Tuesdays and Thursdays." Most of the students weren't interested. They had other sports they were already good at, but Marcus found himself raising his hand before he could think better of it. "Really, Williams?" Tyler laughed. "You want to get better at missing targets?" Mrs. Henderson smiled at Marcus. "Excellent. Anyone else?" A few other students signed up, including Sarah, which surprised everyone since she rarely participated in extracurricular activities. As the bell rang and students filed out of the gym, Mrs. Henderson approached Marcus. "I'm glad you're interested in the club," she said. "I think you might surprise yourself with what you can accomplish." Marcus gathered his things, not sure what had possessed him to sign up for more archery. Maybe it was the way Mrs. Henderson had looked at him, not with pity or amusement, but with something that looked almost like expectation. Or maybe he was just tired of being the person everyone expected to fail. Walking out of the gym, he could still hear Jake and his friends joking about the archery club and how it would be fun to watch Marcus miss even more targets. But for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. He didn't know it yet, but Mrs. Henderson had seen something in his stance, something in the way he held the bow, that reminded her of a natural talent buried under years of self-doubt and ridicule. The real training was about to begin, and Marcus Williams was about to discover that sometimes the people who laugh the loudest are the ones who understand the least about what they're really seeing. Tuesday afternoon arrived faster than Marcus had expected. He found himself standing outside the gym doors, second-guessing his decision to join the archery club. Through the small windows, he could see Mrs. Henderson setting up targets and organizing equipment. His stomach churned with the familiar feeling of anxiety. "You actually showed up?" Sarah's voice came from behind him. She was carrying a small backpack and looked just as nervous as he felt. "I wasn't sure anyone would come." "Yeah, well," Marcus shrugged. "I figure I can't get much worse, right?" They walked into the gym together, where Mrs. Henderson greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome to our first official archery club meeting. I see we have our core group here." Besides Marcus and Sarah, 3 other students had shown up. Amy Rodriguez, a sophomore who was known for being incredibly focused in her studies. David Kim, a junior who played violin in the school orchestra. And surprisingly, Tom Bradley, one of Jake's friends who usually went along with the bullying but had always seemed uncomfortable with it. "Before we start shooting," Mrs. Henderson said, "I want to tell you something about archery that most people don't understand. This isn't just about physical skill or hand-eye coordination. Archery is 90% mental. It's about focus, patience, and understanding your own mind." She picked up a bow and demonstrated the stance again, but this time she explained each movement in detail. Every archer has their own style, their own way of connecting with the bow and arrow. The key is finding what works for you, not copying what works for someone else. Marcus listened carefully, trying to absorb every word. Mrs. Henderson handed out bows that were specifically fitted for each student's draw length and strength. When she gave Marcus his bow, she spent extra time adjusting it. "This bow has a lighter draw weight," she explained. "We're going to focus on your form first, then gradually increase the difficulty." Her voice was patient and encouraging, so different from the way other teachers spoke to him during sports. As they began practicing, Mrs. Henderson worked with each student individually. When she reached Marcus, she watched him carefully as he prepared to shoot. "Stop," she said gently before he could release the arrow. "Take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Your body is tense and that tension is traveling through your arms to the bow." Marcus tried to relax, but it was difficult with the memory of yesterday's laughter still fresh in his mind. "Forget about yesterday," Mrs. Henderson said, as if reading his thoughts. "Forget about what anyone else thinks. Right now it's just you, the bow, and the target. Nothing else exists." When Marcus released the arrow this time, it flew straighter than any of his previous attempts. It didn't hit the bullseye, but it landed solidly in the outer blue ring of the target. He looked at Mrs. Henderson in surprise. "That's what happens when you stop fighting yourself," she said with a smile. "Your body knows what to do. You just need to get your mind out of the way." Over the next hour, something amazing began to happen. Marcus's shots became more consistent. He wasn't hitting the center yet, but his arrows were grouping together in the same area of the target, which Mrs. Henderson explained was actually more important than hitting the bullseye. "Consistency is the foundation of accuracy," she told the group. "If you can put 5 arrows in the same spot, even if it's not the center, then we can adjust your aim. But if your arrows are scattered all over the target, there's nothing to work with." Meanwhile, the other students were making progress too. Sarah turned out to have excellent focus and was naturally steady. Amy approached archery with the same methodical precision she brought to her studies. David had surprising upper body strength from playing violin, and his finger control was exceptional. Even Tom seemed to be genuinely enjoying himself, away from the pressure to act tough around his usual group of friends. As the session continued, Mrs. Henderson began sharing stories about her own archery journey. "I started when I was about your age," she said while they took a break. "I was terrible at first. My coach used to say I shot like I was afraid of the bow. It took me 2 years to hit a bullseye consistently." "You were bad at archery?" Amy asked, surprised. Mrs. Henderson made it look so effortless. "Awful." Mrs. Henderson laughed. "But I had something that many people don't have when they start sports. I had a coach who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She saw potential that I couldn't see. She looked directly at Marcus when she said this, and he felt something stir inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in any gym class before. It was the feeling of being seen not as a failure, but as someone with untapped potential. Near the end of the session, Mrs. Henderson had them play a simple game. Each archer would shoot 3 arrows, and the person with the tightest group would win, regardless of where on the target the arrows landed. The prize was getting to choose the music for their next practice session. When it was Marcus's turn, he felt the familiar nervousness creeping in. But he remembered Mrs. Henderson's words about breathing and focus. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and when he opened them, the chatter and distraction seemed to fade away. His first arrow landed in the red ring. His second arrow landed just an inch away from the first. His third arrow was so close to the second that they were almost touching. The gym was quiet for a moment before Mrs. Henderson began clapping. "Excellent grouping, Marcus. That's exactly what we're looking for." Marcus stared at his arrows in amazement. He had done that. He had actually done something right in a gym class. "Looks like you get to pick our music," Mrs. Henderson said with a grin. As they packed up the equipment, Tom approached Marcus hesitantly. "Hey man, that was really cool what you did there. I mean, those shots were seriously good." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. Tom had never spoken to him outside of making jokes with Jake's group. "Thanks," Marcus said simply. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Tom continued. "But why did you stick with it today? I mean, after yesterday and all the laughing." Marcus thought about it for a moment. "I guess I got tired of being the person everyone expected to fail, and Mrs. Henderson made me feel like maybe I don't have to be that person." As they left the gym, Sarah fell into step beside Marcus. "See you Thursday?" she asked. "Definitely," Marcus replied, and for the first time in years, he was genuinely looking forward to a sports activity. What Marcus didn't know was that Mrs. Henderson had been taking notes during the session, documenting each student's progress and natural abilities. Next to Marcus's name, she had written, "Natural archer's instinct. Excellent muscle memory. Needs confidence building. Potential for competitive level." The real journey was just beginning. Thursday's archery club meeting brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus arrived early, hoping to get some extra practice time, only to find Mrs. Henderson talking with a tall man in his 50s who was examining the archery equipment with a professional eye. "Marcus, perfect timing," Mrs. Henderson called out. "I'd like you to meet Coach Robert Martinez. He runs the county's youth archery program and coaches several state champions." Coach Martinez extended his hand with a firm grip. "Helen tells me you've got some natural talent. Mind if I watch you shoot a few arrows?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was exactly the kind of pressure situation where he usually fell apart completely. "I'm not very good yet," he said quickly. "I've only been doing this for a few days." "The best time to see natural ability is before someone learns bad habits," Coach Martinez replied with a knowing smile. "Just shoot like you normally would." As the other club members arrived, they sensed something important was happening. Mrs. Henderson had set up a single target at 20 yards, farther than they usually practiced. "Why is there a real coach here?" Amy whispered to Sarah as they gathered their equipment. "Maybe Mrs. Henderson is thinking about starting a competitive team," Sarah replied, though she wasn't sure herself. Marcus approached the shooting line with his hands trembling slightly. He had been feeling more confident during their regular club sessions, but having a professional coach evaluate him brought back all his old anxieties about being judged and found lacking. "Take your time," Coach Martinez said quietly. "Pretend I'm not here." Marcus knocked his arrow and tried to focus on Mrs. Henderson's teachings. Breathe. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your body relax. He drew the bowstring back to his anchor point, aimed at the center of the target, and released. The arrow flew straight and true, landing in the gold ring just outside the bullseye. Marcus blinked in surprise. That was one of his best shots ever. "Good," Coach Martinez said simply. Again, Marcus's second arrow landed even closer to the center. His third arrow was so close to the bullseye that it would have been a perfect shot by most people's standards. Coach Martinez nodded slowly, then asked Marcus to shoot from 30 yards. The increased distance made the target look impossibly small. But Marcus found that when he focused on his breathing and form instead of worrying about the distance, his shots remained surprisingly accurate. "Interesting," Coach Martinez murmured, making notes on a small pad. Helen, could I see him shoot with a recurve bow instead of the compound? Mrs. Henderson raised her eyebrows, but retrieved a more traditional bow from the equipment room. This will be harder, Marcus. No sights, no stabilizers, just you and the bow. Marcus had never used a recurve bow before, but as soon as he held it, something felt right. The weight distribution was different, and he had to rely entirely on instinctive aiming rather than the sight pins he had been using. His first shot with the recurve bow was wide, but his second and third shots showed remarkable improvement. By his fifth shot, he was hitting the target consistently, and by his 10th shot, he was grouping his arrows in a tight pattern. That's enough, Coach Martinez said, but his tone wasn't dismissive. Marcus, can I ask you something? Have you ever done any other sports that required hand-eye coordination? Baseball, tennis, anything like that? I've tried most sports, Marcus replied, confusion evident in his voice. I'm terrible at all of them. Everyone says I have no athletic ability whatsoever. Coach Martinez exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Henderson. Some people are built for team sports, others for individual sports, and some people are built for very specific activities that require a particular type of focus and body awareness. He turned to address the entire group. What you just witnessed is something I see maybe once every few years. Marcus has what we call natural archery instinct. His body position, his draw, his release. These are things that usually take months or years to develop. The other club members looked at Marcus with new respect. Tom seemed especially impressed, while Sarah smiled like she had suspected something special about Marcus all along. But here's the thing, Coach Martinez continued. Natural talent is just the starting point. What matters is what you do with it. I've seen naturally gifted archers give up because they expected everything to come easily, and I've seen less talented archers become champions through dedication and proper training. He handed Marcus a business card. I run training sessions for competitive archers every Saturday morning at the county range. If you're interested in taking this seriously, I'd like to invite you to join us. Marcus stared at the card in disbelief. A few weeks ago, he had been the laughingstock of every gym class. Now a professional coach was inviting him to train with competitive archers. What does competitive archery involve? David asked, curious about the sport he was just learning. Local tournaments, state championships, maybe even national competitions if you develop enough skill. Coach Martinez explained. It's a sport where dedication and mental discipline matter more than being the biggest or fastest person. It's a sport where someone like Marcus could potentially earn college scholarships. The word scholarships hung in the air. Marcus came from a family where money was always tight, and college seemed like an impossible dream. His parents worked 2 jobs each just to keep up with bills. After Coach Martinez left, the club members continued their regular practice, but there was a different energy in the room. Everyone was pushing themselves harder, inspired by seeing what was possible. Mrs. Henderson pulled Marcus aside near the end of the session. I need you to understand something, she said seriously. Coach Martinez doesn't give out invitations lightly. He's trained 3 Olympic team members and dozens of national champions. If he sees potential in you, it's because the potential is really there. But what if I mess it up? Marcus asked, voicing his deepest fear. What if I get there and can't perform? What if I'm just lucky right now? Then you'll learn from it and get better, Mrs. Henderson replied. But Marcus, you'll never know what you're capable of if you don't try. And I have a feeling you're capable of more than you realize. As Marcus walked home that evening, he kept pulling Coach Martinez's business card from his pocket and reading it. The Saturday training session started at 8 in the morning and ran until noon. It would mean giving up sleeping in on weekends, something he had always looked forward to. But for the first time in his life, Marcus had found something he might actually be good at. More than that, he had found something that made him feel capable and confident instead of clumsy and embarrassed. When he got home, his parents were in the kitchen paying bills as they did every Thursday evening. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then sat down at the table with them. Mom, Dad, he began, I need to tell you about something that happened today. As he explained about the archery club, Coach Martinez, and the invitation to train competitively, his parents listened with growing amazement. They had watched their son struggle with confidence in sports for years, and seeing his excitement about something was a wonderful change. If this is what you want to do, his father said finally, we'll find a way to make it work. Marcus went to bed that night with Coach Martinez's business card on his nightstand and a feeling he had never experienced before, the feeling that he might actually have a future in sports. He had no idea that tomorrow's regular gym class would test his newfound confidence in ways he never imagined. Friday's gym class arrived with an unexpected announcement that would change everything for Marcus. Mrs. Henderson stood before the class with a clipboard and a slight smile that suggested she had something special planned. "Today we're going to have a friendly archery competition," she announced. "I've divided you into teams and we'll have several different challenges. The winning team gets to skip the written exam on sports rules next week." The class buzzed with excitement about avoiding the exam, but Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Competition meant people watching, judging, and expecting him to fail spectacularly. Jake Morrison raised his hand with a smirk. "Mrs. Henderson, can we pick our own teams? I mean, some people might drag down the whole group." His eyes locked onto Marcus, and several students snickered. "Teams are already assigned," Mrs. Henderson replied firmly, "and they're designed to be fair and balanced." She began reading names, and Marcus held his breath until he heard his own name called alongside Sarah. David from the archery club and two other students he didn't know well. Jake's team included Tyler, Amy Rodriguez, and two of the best athletes in the class. Other teams were similarly mixed with strong and weaker athletes. "This is rigged," Tyler muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Henderson put all the worst archers together so they won't embarrass the good teams." Mrs. Henderson ignored the comment and explained the competition format. There would be 3 challenges: accuracy at 20 yards, accuracy at 30 yards, and a final challenge she called pressure shooting, where each team member would shoot 1 arrow at 40 yards with everyone watching. As the team set up at their assigned lanes, Marcus could feel the familiar weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. His teammates looked at him with expressions ranging from resignation to mild sympathy. "Just do your best," Sarah whispered encouragingly. "Don't worry about what anyone else thinks." The first challenge began, and Marcus watched as the other teams shot their practice rounds. Jake's team was performing exactly as expected. Consistently good shots, lots of confidence, and plenty of trash talk directed at the weaker teams. When it was Marcus's turn for the practice round, he approached the line with every eye in the class on him. The gymnasium felt impossibly quiet despite being full of teenagers. He knocked his arrow, drew the bowstring back, and tried to remember everything he had learned in archery club. Breathe, focus, trust your body. The arrow left his bow and sailed toward the target, landing solidly in the red ring. "Not bad, Williams," someone called out, though the tone suggested surprise rather than mockery. Marcus shot 4 more practice arrows, each one landing in the red or gold rings. His grouping was tight and consistent, exactly what Coach Martinez had praised him for. Jake's confident expression began to shift as he watched Marcus's shots. "He's probably just lucky," he said to Tyler, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. When the official scoring began, something remarkable happened. Marcus entered what athletes call the zone, that mental state where everything else fades away except the task at hand. Arrow after arrow found its mark, most landing in the gold ring, several very close to the bullseye. His teammates watched in amazement as their expected weak link became their strongest performer. Sarah shot well, David was steady and consistent, and their other teammates held their own, but Marcus was shooting at a level that surprised everyone in the gymnasium. "What's happening to Williams?" Tyler asked Jake during a break between challenges. "He's shooting better than any of us." Jake didn't have an answer. He had built his identity around being the best athlete in the class, and watching Marcus excel at something was shaking his confidence. The second challenge at 30 yards separated the truly skilled archers from those who were just getting lucky. The increased distance made the target look much smaller, and several students who had shot well at 20 yards began struggling. Marcus approached the 30-yard line feeling more confident than he had ever felt in any gym class. As he drew his bow, he noticed that the familiar sounds of snickering and whispered jokes had been replaced by genuine attention. People were watching him not because they expected him to fail, but because they wanted to see what he could do. His first arrow at 30 yards landed just outside the bullseye. His second arrow was even closer. By his 5th arrow, he had achieved something that made Mrs. Henderson stop what she was doing and watch intently. He had put 3 arrows in the Gold ring and a tight group that any experienced archer would be proud of. How is he doing that? Amy asked Sarah quietly. He was terrible just a few weeks ago. I don't think he was ever terrible, Sarah replied thoughtfully. I think he just needed the right sport and the right teacher. As the second challenge concluded, the scores were closer than anyone had expected. Jake's team was still in the lead, but Marcus's team had closed the gap significantly, and it was entirely due to Marcus's unexpected excellence. Mrs. Henderson announced the final challenge, 1 arrow per team member at 40 yards, with the entire class watching each shot. This is about handling pressure, she explained. In real archery competitions, you have to perform when it matters most, when everyone is watching, when there's no room for error. Jake's team would shoot last, which was traditionally considered an advantage because they would know what score they needed to beat. Marcus's team would shoot third out of 5 teams. As the first 2 teams completed their pressure shots with mixed results, Marcus found himself thinking about Coach Martinez's words about natural instinct and mental discipline. He thought about all the years of being laughed at, all the times he had been picked last for teams, all the moments when he had felt like he didn't belong in any athletic activity. This was his chance to prove, not to everyone else, but to himself, that he was more than the failure everyone expected him to be. When Mrs. Henderson called his name for the pressure shot, Marcus walked to the 40-yard line with a calmness that surprised him. The gymnasium was quieter than he had ever heard it during a gym class. Even Jake and Tyler had stopped their usual commentary. Marcus knocked his arrow and took his stance. 40 yards was farther than he had ever shot successfully, and missing would likely cost his team the victory. But as he drew the bowstring back and settled into his anchor point, he felt something click into place. The target seemed to come into sharp focus while everything else blurred. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat steadied, and for a moment, it felt like the only things that existed in the world were him, his bow, and the distant bullseye. He released the arrow and watched it arc through the air in what seemed like slow motion. The gym was completely silent as the arrow flew toward the target, carrying with it years of frustration, doubt, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Marcus Williams could be good at something. The arrow struck the target with a solid thunk that echoed through the gymnasium. For a moment, no one moved or spoke as they processed what they had just witnessed. Marcus had hit the bullseye, a perfect dead-center bullseye from 40 yards under pressure, with the entire class watching. The silence that followed Marcus's bullseye seemed to stretch forever. Students stood frozen, staring at the target 40 yards away where his arrow had found perfect center. Then Sarah started clapping, and the sound broke the spell that had fallen over the gymnasium. The applause that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. It wasn't the polite clapping teachers sometimes forced when someone finally accomplished something basic. This was genuine amazement, respect, and celebration of something extraordinary. That was incredible, David shouted from Marcus's team. I can't believe you just did that. Jake Morrison stood at the 40-yard line holding his bow and staring at Marcus's arrow in the bullseye. For the first time since elementary school, Jake looked uncertain about his athletic abilities. He had always been the undisputed champion of every sport, every competition, every physical challenge. Mrs. Henderson walked over to the target to verify the shot, though everyone could see clearly that it was a perfect bullseye. 10 points, she announced officially, but her voice carried something more than just a score. It carried pride, vindication, and the satisfaction of a teacher who had seen potential that others had missed. Jake's turn at the pressure shot was a disaster. The stress of following Marcus's perfect shot, combined with the shock of seeing the class loser suddenly become the class champion, threw off his concentration completely. His arrow landed in the outer blue ring, a decent shot under normal circumstances, but nowhere near the standard he had set for himself. Tyler's shot was even worse, missing the target entirely and embedding in the hay bales. The rest of Jake's team struggled as well, clearly rattled by the unexpected turn of events. When the final scores were tallied, Marcus's team had won by a significant margin. The victory was almost entirely due to Marcus's performance, but his teammates celebrated as if they had contributed equally. How did you do that? Amy asked Marcus as the class gathered their equipment. I mean, seriously, how did you go from missing the target completely to hitting perfect bullseyes? Marcus wasn't sure how to answer. I guess I just needed to find the right sport, he said simply. But Tom Bradley, who had been quietly observing the entire competition, approached Marcus with a serious expression. Can I talk to you for a minute? He asked. They walked to a quiet corner of the gym while the rest of the class continued celebrating and discussing the unexpected results. I owe you an apology, Tom said, looking uncomfortable. I've been going along with Jake and Tyler laughing at you, making jokes. But watching you today, I realize we were wrong about you. Really wrong. Marcus was surprised by Tom's honesty. It's okay, he said. I mean, I was pretty bad at everything else. No, it's not okay, Tom insisted. We made you feel like you were worthless at sports, but the truth is you just hadn't found your sport yet. What you did today, that takes real skill and mental toughness. Jake's been bragging about his athletic abilities for years, but when the pressure was on, he cracked. You didn't. As they rejoined the group, Marcus noticed that the social dynamics of the class had shifted dramatically. Students who had never acknowledged his existence before were coming up to congratulate him and ask questions about archery. But the most significant change was in Jake Morrison. The usual swagger and confidence were gone, replaced by something Marcus had never seen before: vulnerability and uncertainty. After class, Jake approached Marcus hesitantly. Hey, Williams, he said, and for the first time there was no mockery in his voice. That was really something. Marcus waited for the punchline, the sarcastic comment or the backhanded compliment, but Jake seemed genuinely at a loss for words. I guess I was wrong about you, Jake finally said. I thought you were just bad at sports, but maybe you're just good at different sports than the rest of us. It wasn't exactly an apology, but coming from Jake Morrison, it was significant. Marcus nodded and headed toward the door, still processing everything that had happened. Mrs. Henderson caught up with him in the hallway. Marcus, I need to tell you something, she said. What you did in there today was remarkable, but it wasn't just about archery. You showed mental toughness under pressure that most high school athletes never develop. She handed him a form. I spoke with Coach Martinez this morning. He wants you to compete in the regional youth tournament next month. It's a big step. You'd be competing against archers who have been training for years. Marcus looked at the form with a mixture of excitement and terror. Do you think I'm ready for that? I think you'll never know what you're capable of unless you try, Mrs. Henderson replied. But Marcus, you need to understand that success in archery isn't just about natural talent. It's about dedication, practice, and mental discipline. Are you willing to commit to serious training? Marcus thought about all the years of being the class joke, all the times he had felt worthless and incompetent. He thought about Coach Martinez's words about potential and scholarships. Most importantly, he thought about how it felt to excel at something, to be respected for his abilities instead of mocked for his failures. Yes, he said firmly. I want to try, Mrs. Henderson smiled. Then we start intensive training on Monday. And Marcus, what happened today was just the beginning. If you're willing to work for it, you could go much farther than anyone imagines. As Marcus walked home that afternoon, he kept replaying the moment when his arrow hit the bullseye. For 40 yards and one perfect shot, he had been the best athlete in the class. For the first time in his life, he had been the person everyone else wanted to be. But more than that, he had discovered something about himself that no one else had ever seen. He had natural talent, mental toughness, and the ability to perform under pressure. These were qualities that could take him places he had never dared to dream about. That evening, Marcus called Coach Martinez to accept the invitation to Saturday training sessions. As he explained what had happened in gym class, he could hear the excitement in the coach's voice. A bullseye from 40 yards under pressure after only a few weeks of training, Coach Martinez said. Marcus, I think we need to talk about accelerating your development. There are opportunities coming up that you might be ready for sooner than I originally thought. As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that his life had changed completely in the space of a single gym class. Yesterday, he had been the person everyone expected to fail. Today, he was an archer with real potential, someone Coach Martinez believed could compete at high levels. His parents had listened to his excited retelling of the day's events with growing amazement. His mother had tears in her eyes when he described hitting the bullseye, not just because of his success, but because she hadn't seen him this confident and happy about anything in years. We're so proud of you, his father said, not just because you won today, but because you didn't give up when things were hard. That night, Marcus lay in bed thinking about tomorrow's archery club meeting. For the first time, he would walk into that gym not as someone hoping to improve, but as someone who had proven he belonged there. The other club members would look at him differently now, with respect instead of sympathy. But even more importantly, Marcus would look at himself differently. The voice in his head that had always whispered, "You're going to fail," had been replaced by something new. A quiet confidence that whispered, "You can do this." He thought about Jake Morrison's shocked expression, about the genuine applause from his classmates, about Mrs. Henderson's proud smile. But mostly he thought about that moment when his arrow had flown through the air, carrying with it years of doubt, and landed perfectly in the center of the target. It had been more than just a bullseye. It had been proof that sometimes the people who laugh the loudest are the ones who understand the least about what they're really seeing, and sometimes the person everyone counts out is the one who ends up surprising everyone the most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, harder training, and bigger competitions. But tonight, Marcus Williams fell asleep as someone completely different from the person who had woken up that morning. He fell asleep as an archer. 3 weeks of intensive training had transformed Marcus in ways that went far beyond his archery skills. Every morning at 6, he ran 2 miles to build stamina. Every afternoon after school, he spent 2 hours at the range working on technique. Every Saturday, he trained with Coach Martinez and the competitive team, learning advanced strategies and mental techniques. The changes were visible to everyone at school. Marcus walked differently now, straighter, more confident, with the bearing of someone who knew he was good at something important. His grades had improved because the discipline required for archery had spilled over into his study habits. Even his relationship with his parents had changed as they watched their son develop focus and determination they had never seen before. But the biggest test was still ahead. The regional youth tournament was tomorrow, and Marcus would be competing against archers who had been training since elementary school. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked as they packed up equipment after Thursday's archery club meeting. The club had grown to 12 members as word spread about Marcus's success and Coach Martinez's involvement with their program. Terrified, Marcus admitted honestly. "What if yesterday's bullseye was just luck? What if I get there and can't perform?" Mrs. Henderson overheard the conversation and approached them. "Marcus, can I tell you something about fear and competition?" She sat down on the gym bleachers and motioned for him to join her. "I competed in archery at the college level. I was good, very good, but I almost quit during my first major tournament because I was so afraid of failing that I forgot why I loved the sport in the first place." "What happened?" Marcus asked. "My coach told me something I've never forgotten. He said that fear of failure and excitement about opportunity feel exactly the same in your body. The only difference is what you tell yourself about those feelings. You can interpret that nervous energy as, 'I'm going to embarrass myself,' or you can interpret it as, 'I'm about to do something amazing.'" Marcus thought about this as he walked home. The butterflies in his stomach could be anxiety about failing, or they could be excitement about the chance to prove himself at a higher level. That evening, Coach Martinez called with final instructions for the tournament. "Remember everything we've practiced," he said. "Focus on your process, not your results. Shoot your own competition. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. And Marcus, trust yourself. You've earned the right to be there." Saturday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching Marcus's nervous mood. The tournament was being held at the State Athletics Complex, a facility that seemed impossibly large and professional compared to their school gym. As Marcus walked into the archery range, he was overwhelmed by the sight of dozens of young archers warming up with equipment that looked far more advanced than anything he had ever used. Some competitors had coaches analyzing their form with video cameras. Others had custom-made bows that probably cost more than Marcus's family spent on groceries in a month. "They all look so professional," Marcus whispered to Coach Martinez. "So do you," the coach replied firmly. "You belong here just as much as anyone else. Your talent got you here, not your equipment or your bank account." As Marcus registered for the competition, he noticed other competitors and their coaches looking at him curiously. He was clearly the unknown factor. No one had heard of Lincoln High School's archery program because it had barely existed a month ago. The tournament format was elimination style. Archers would shoot a qualifying round, and the top 16 would advance to head-to-head matches. Marcus had never competed in anything like this before. where his performance would be directly compared to others in real time. During the practice period, Marcus tried to settle his nerves by focusing on his routine. Draw, anchor, aim, release. Draw, anchor, aim, release. The familiar rhythm helped calm his racing heart. "Hey, you're the new kid, right?" A girl about his age approached during a break in practice. "I'm Jessica Chen. I've been competing for about 5 years. "Marcus Williams," he replied. "This is my first tournament." Jessica's eyes widened. "First tournament? And you qualified for regionals? That's impressive. What's your average score?" Marcus realized he didn't really know how to answer that. He had been focusing so much on improving that he hadn't paid much attention to his scores compared to competitive standards. "I'm not sure," he said honestly. "I'm just trying to shoot my best," Jessica smiled. "That's actually the right attitude. Half the archers here are so worried about their scores and rankings that they forget to just shoot well." When the qualifying round began, Marcus found himself assigned to a target next to Derek Morrison, a 17-year-old archer who had been competing since he was 8 and had won multiple state championships. "First tournament?" Derek asked, noticing Marcus's nervous energy. "That obvious?" Marcus replied. "Everyone's nervous at their first regional tournament," Derek said kindly. "The trick is to remember that the target doesn't know it's a tournament. It's the same distance, same size, same bullseye you've been practicing on." As the qualifying round progressed, something remarkable happened. The nervous energy that had been making Marcus feel sick transformed into the sharp focus he had learned to cultivate during training. Each arrow felt clean and controlled. His groupings were tight and consistent. When the scores were posted after the qualifying round, Marcus stared at the board in disbelief. He had not only qualified for the elimination rounds, he had qualified 3rd overall, behind only Derek Morrison and another archer who had been competing for over 6 years. "How is that possible?" he asked Coach Martinez. "It's possible because you're a natural competitor," the coach replied with pride. "Some people shoot well in practice but fall apart in competition. Others rise to the occasion when it matters. You're clearly in the second category." The elimination rounds would begin after lunch, and Marcus would face increasingly skilled opponents with each victory. But for the first time since arriving at the tournament, he felt like he truly belonged there. As he sat in the competitors' area eating lunch and watching other matches, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. A month ago, he had been the person everyone expected to fail at everything athletic. Now he was sitting in 3rd place at a regional archery tournament, preparing to compete against some of the best young archers in the state. The transformation hadn't been magic. It had been the result of finding the right sport, getting proper coaching, and discovering that he had abilities he never knew existed. But more than that, it had been about changing how he saw himself and what he believed he was capable of. Achieving the afternoon elimination rounds would determine whether Marcus's incredible journey would continue to the state tournament, or whether this would be as far as his archery career would take him. Either way, he had already proven something important to himself and everyone who had ever doubted him. The scared, uncertain boy who had missed his first target completely was gone forever, replaced by a confident archer who belonged among the best competitors in his age group. The elimination rounds began with Marcus facing a skilled archer from the state capital, who had been competing for 4 years. As they took their positions, Marcus could see a small crowd gathering to watch, including several coaches who had noticed his impressive qualifying score and wanted to see if the unknown archer could maintain his performance under pressure. "This is it," Marcus told himself. "Everything you've learned, everything you've practiced, it all comes down to the next few minutes." The format was simple. Each archer would shoot 3 arrows, and the higher total score would advance. Marcus's opponent shot first, putting together a solid score that would require Marcus to shoot very well to advance. As Marcus approached the line, he noticed Jake Morrison and several other classmates from school standing near the spectator area. Mrs. Henderson must have told them about the tournament. Instead of feeling additional pressure, seeing familiar faces gave him confidence. These were people who had witnessed his transformation from class joke to competitive archer. Marcus's first arrow landed in the gold ring just outside the 10-point bullseye. His second arrow was closer to center. As he knocked his third arrow, he could feel the familiar calm settling over him, the mental state where everything else faded away except the target. The third arrow flew true, and struck dead center for a perfect 10. Marcus had advanced to the quarterfinals with a score that impressed even the experienced coaches watching. "Incredible shooting," his opponent said genuinely as they shook hands. "You've got real talent. How long have you been competing?" "About 4 hours," Marcus replied with a grin. The quarterfinal match was against Derek Morrison, the state champion he had met during practice. This would be a true test of how far Marcus had come and how much potential he really had. "I've been watching your matches," Derek said as they prepared to shoot. "You have something special, the ability to shoot your best when it matters most. That's rarer than you might think." Derek shot first and posted an excellent score that would normally be enough to advance. But Marcus had found something in these elimination rounds that he had never experienced before: the ability to elevate his performance when facing better competition. His first 2 arrows matched Derek's best shots. With 1 arrow left and the match tied, Marcus stood at the line knowing that everything he had worked for came down to this single shot. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by word that an unknown archer was potentially about to defeat a state champion in his first tournament. Coach Martinez stood behind the shooting line, his expression confident despite the pressure of the moment. Marcus drew his bow and settled into his anchor point. In his peripheral vision, he could see Derek watching respectfully, knowing that this shot would determine not just who advanced, but whether Marcus's incredible story would continue. Time seemed to slow as Marcus released the arrow. It arced through the air with perfect form, landing so close to the center that the judges had to examine it carefully before announcing the score. 10 points, the judge called out, and the crowd erupted in applause. Derek approached with a huge smile and extended his hand. "That was one of the best shots I've ever seen under pressure. You're going to do great things in this sport." The semifinal match was against Jessica Chen, the friendly archer who had encouraged him during practice. Both had shot consistently excellent scores throughout the day, and their match was so close that it came down to a shoot-off, 1 arrow each, winner take all. "Whatever happens," Jessica said before the shoot-off, "you've already accomplished something amazing today. Win or lose, you've proven you belong at this level." Marcus appreciated her sportsmanship, but he wasn't ready for his tournament to end. He had come too far and discovered too much about himself to settle for a good showing. The shoot-off arrow felt different from any shot Marcus had taken that day. It wasn't just about advancing to the finals. It was about proving to himself that the scared, uncertain boy who had been mocked in gym class was truly gone forever. His arrow found the center of the target with authority, and Marcus advanced to his first tournament final. The championship match was against an archer from the State Training Academy who had been expected to win the tournament easily. As they prepared for the final, Marcus thought about everyone who had helped him reach this moment. Mrs. Henderson, who had seen potential when everyone else saw failure. Coach Martinez, who had believed in him from the beginning. His parents, who had supported his new passion even when money was tight. And even his classmates, who had learned to respect him for his abilities. The final was the closest match of the day. Both archers shot exceptionally well, with the lead changing after each round of arrows. With 1 arrow remaining, Marcus found himself tied for the regional championship. As he approached the line for his final shot, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. A few months ago, he had been the person everyone expected to fail. Now he was 1 arrow away from becoming a regional champion and earning a spot at the state tournament. But win or lose, Marcus had already achieved something more important than any trophy. He had discovered who he really was when given the chance to succeed. He had learned that natural talent meant nothing without dedication and proper coaching. Most importantly, he had proven that sometimes the people who laugh the loudest are the ones who understand the least about what they're really seeing. His final arrow left his bow with perfect form and confidence. As it flew toward the target, Marcus knew that regardless of where it landed, he had already won the most important competition, the one against his own self-doubt. The arrow struck the 10 ring, securing Marcus's victory as regional champion. As the crowd cheered and Coach Martinez rushed to congratulate him, Marcus looked up in the stands and saw his parents, Mrs. Henderson, and even Jake Morrison applauding with genuine respect and admiration. Later, as Marcus held his first-place trophy and posed for pictures with Coach Martinez, a reporter from the local newspaper asked him about his incredible journey from unknown archer to regional champion. What would you say to other young people who feel like they're not good at sports? The reporter asked. Marcus thought for a moment before answering. I'd tell them that maybe they just haven't found their sport yet. And I'd tell them that what other people think about your abilities matters a lot less than what you're willing to work for. As he drove home with his parents that evening, Marcus's regional championship trophy sitting on the seat beside him, he thought about Monday's gym class. For the first time in his school career, he was looking forward to walking into that gymnasium, not as someone hoping to avoid embarrassment, but as a proven athlete who had earned his place among the best. The scared boy who had missed his first target completely was gone forever, replaced by a regional champion who had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from beating others, but from discovering what you're truly capable of when you refuse to give up on yourself. Behind every bullseye was a story of transformation, and Marcus Williams had just written one of the most remarkable chapters anyone at Lincoln High School had ever seen.